Welcome to Watch One. Thanks for logging on. Today we're looking at one of the latest offerings from Breitling in the classic Breitling big polish style. This is the Breitling Chronomat B04 GMT. Now it's an update of the classic Chronomat line, which is since the revival of Breitling in 1982 under Ernest Schneider, it is the best-selling line in the Breitling catalog. So while the Navitimer is arguably the icon, the Chronomat for Breitling has been the breadwinner. And this watch, in 47mm polished stainless steel, demonstrates all of the essential elements that have made the Chronomat Breitling's big winner since 1982. Now let's start with a wrist impression before we get into what's under the hood, because this watch has got something special. Now 47mm, I would say this watch wears true to size, maybe even a little bit bigger. If you're familiar with a 47mm Panerai, either a 1940 or a 1950 case, this definitely wears bigger than that. This feels in size closer to something like an Hublot King Power at 48mm, maybe even a little bit bigger. This watch has a ton of presence, and on my wrist, which is 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters, I can tell you that it would fit if the bracelet were sized down, but due to the height of the watch, it would probably never fit under a long sleeve or a cuff of any kind. But that's okay, because this is kind of a happy-go-lucky sporting style. This is a watch for a guy with a big wrist who wants a big watch with a big impact, and this Chronomat B04 GMT definitely delivers. First and foremost, full polish has become something of a Breitling and a Chronomat line signature, and when you've got it on the 5-link pilot bracelet, that enormous, bold 47mm case, and the engraved, polished bezel with rider tabs, there's no missing this watch. Plus, the dial gives you an element of complexity and nuance that you might not expect on something that's so large and so extrovert. There's actually tremendous subtlety going there, and it starts with that bi-level tachometer scale. Now, I'm showing you the watch from an angle, so you can see how the levels from the inner bezel drop down to the tachometer scale, which you can see is almost cantilevered outward slightly above the 24-hour track of the GMT. There's actually a gap, almost like an awning or an overhang, between the white of the tachometer scale and the dial itself, which is a gorgeous chocolate brown, almost bronze color. Metallic, very beautiful. Even that features a special distinction, because there is a effect created with a subtle guilloche of the center portion in a rectangular shape, and this is actually reinforced by the shape of the applied indexes. You can see how they flatten out and frame that square intersection, and it's a nice contrast to the circular dial, to the circular subdials. You have that interplay of soft rounded shapes and hard rectilinear geometries, and even that itself is actually consonant with the rider tabs on the periphery of the bezel, so there's a lot of cross-referencing of shapes to accompany the contrasts that are built in to the bezel, to the dial, to the tachometer, between the tachometer and the dial, between the subdials and the guilloche center portion. Thoughtful, surprisingly subtle, surprisingly nuanced for a watch that is, first and foremost, a very extrovert, very confident piece for a very confident wrist. Now, this watch is not part of the Breitling for Bentley line, but it definitely has that air de famille about it. You can see that the inspiration is similar and the effect is right in line with what the Bentleys achieve. This does have the advantage of not being co-branded, so if you like the Breitling for Bentley look, but you're not necessarily a fan of having a car on your wrist, this is the model for you. And because it is full polish, you get a really premium steel sheen from it, knowing that what's under the hood, to continue the car analogy, is up to snuff. So let's talk a little bit about the Breitling in-house chronograph movements and how they sort of merge with the Chronomat family, Breitling's breadwinner, as I said. Now, 2009, the B01 caliber, Breitling's first in-house chronograph movement of the 21st century, debuts, and because of the Chronomat's importance to the company, it debuts not in the Navitimer, not in the Superocean, but in the latter-day icon, the Chronomat line. Now 2011 rolls around, we get our first evolution of the B01, the B04 movement. Still in-house, auto-winding, all of the goodies of the original B01, but now with the addition of a 24-hour GMT hand, which you see right here. So this watch has a lot of toys. First and foremost, auto-winding 72-hour power reserve. Breitling wanted the B01 to be on par with the industry standard Rolex Daytona 4130 movement. mission accomplished. The power reserve is awesome. At 3 days, this is the kind of watch that you can rotate through your collection. If you want to wear something a little bit more discreet, maybe for formal occasions, put this watch down for a day or two, then pick it back up. You're not going to have to reset 2 time zones in a date. This watch will be raring to go. Now, they also incorporated the column wheel mechanism to the movement. The B04, like the B01, features that classic chronograph function actuator, so you get the crisp feel of the start, stop, and reset. As in traditional horology, you get that rifle bolt sensation under the finger, and the tactile sensation is part of the luxury experience. So it's a distinct upgrade from previous Breitling chronographs, which were principally based on the coulisse or cam-operated Valjoux 7750. This feels a lot better in the hand. Again, the word is premium. Now, the B04 gives you a lot of complexity. Not only do you have a 24-hour hand, but it's not just a GMT, it is a true second time zone. If you're familiar with older Rolex GMT Masters, where the second hour hand was just a half-speed version of the first and the two always moved in sync, this is not like that. You can set both the local and the reference 24-hour time separately, or set them to the same time and use the GMT hand as a 24-hour indicator to distinguish between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m., for instance. Jump date, you have just about all the toys you'll ever need to make this your daily wearer. It'll wind itself, it'll keep the time, it's got a long power reserve between the date, the second time zone, and the chronograph stopwatch. It's also got all the complications you'll ever need. But what it has that not every pilot-inspired watch has is outstanding water resistance. Now, in a lot of ways, the Chronomat is a pilot's watch. Originally developed in the early 80s with assistance from the Italian Air Force, it was sort of the modern rebirth of the famed Breitling pilot's watch, but the line has branched out to include watches like this Chronomat B04 that could be considered effective dive watches as well, with a unidirectional bezel that features a illuminated pearl at the 12 o'clock position. You can time your dive. Using the chronograph and the unidirectional bezel, you can effectively time 2 separate events up to 60 minutes simultaneously. More than that, the watch features screw-down pushers and a screw-down Chronomat signature onion crown, that feature that's defined the Chronomat since the early 80s. And because of those screw-downs, you have 500-meter water resistance. Just to put that in perspective, this pilot watch has more water resistance than a standard Rolex Submariner or an Omega Seamaster Professional 300 meter. Not bad. This watch has an outstanding level of finish. Regardless of whether or not you're into the high polish look, everything about the finish of this watch, the fit, the quality of the materials, the solidity of the bracelet, the feel on the wrist, it's superb. It's top-notch. It gives up nothing to its rivals from Rolex and Omega, and in some respects this 5-link pilot bracelet may be the best of the bunch. Now, Rolex's latest oysters are outstanding, and Omega's Seamaster Professional has been one of the best in the business since the late 90s. But for the first time, I feel that with this standard of finish on the 5-link pilot, Breitling is finally in the game. They're playing, they're competing to win, and I would put this up against the best from the other big two members of the big three. So consider this Breitling Chronomat B04 GMT something of a two-way player, a pilot-inspired sports watch that can also roll with the punches and roll with the waves among the dive watches. An outstanding watch, very versatile. If you've got the wrist to pull it off, watch you want just might have the watch for you. And this one is 100% complete with all Breitling original factory accessories. See this outstanding stainless steel 47mm chocolate dialed Breitling Chronomat B04 GMT, Breitling's breadwinner and latter-day icon on our website, Watch You Want.